I think it will be wonderful if we can start this with your thoughts on longevity of careers and the meaning of work. What will people, what do you think people's definition of work is going to be in the times to come? And how are they going to derive pleasure, monetary benefits, giving back, all of the above from work in the times to come? Over to you, Vishnu.
Thank you, Sushma. Thank you, Shanti. Thank you, Sudha. And happy to meet all my fellow alumni from NIT Trichy. It was Bhakta sir who called up and said, Vishnu, there is an opportunity. And I was actually wondering, why would a bureaucrat like me, an IAS officer like me, want to address this? And I was actually a bit reluctant in the beginning. Let me put that too. But then I had a long conversation with Sushma, and that was when I was convinced that this initiative is something which impacts a larger policy framework from an Indian context, and more importantly, this is one of the biggest challenges as a public policy practitioner, not only the government, as a society, we're going to face sooner or later. So it is in this context I thought, okay, fine, let me give my 2 cents on what I think, and more importantly, contextualize what's happening at the global level, and then bring an Indian perspective to what is the way forward for not just the government, but as a society as a whole. So that's the context in which I agreed to give this conversation. Otherwise, I've got nothing to do with this initiative at all. But nevertheless, happy to support for any initiative put forward by the NIT Trichy alumni network. So Sushma, I mean, let me just give you a broad, what is the trend globally? I mean, you did use a couple of words, even Sudha also said about longevity, careers, and thing. But let me just put a public policy perspective into the whole domain of longevity. What does it really mean for countries and states and societies? Number one, people are working longer into their life, which means the share of labor force participation of people who are 65 plus. When I say longer, I'm talking about not the 18 to 60 working age, 65 plus. If you look at countries like Japan, it's gone up from 20 to 26%. I'm talking about a time frame from 2000 to 2025, over a 25-year time period. US 13 to 20, Canada 6 to 15, France 2 to 5. So pretty much doubling has happened in the proportion of people who are actually entering the labor force 65 plus or continuing their labor force participation. This coupled with another very important aspect, the fertility of the world is dropping, which means, simply put, number of children a live births a woman can have. Ideally, the replacement rate for the human race is 2.1, including the infant mortality rate. You need to have 2.1 children. I mean, 0.1 is a statistical number. You can't have 2.1 children. It's either 3 or 2. But then keeping into account the infant mortality rates, this replacement rate of the total fertility has been declining for all the countries across the world from 1950 onwards, post-World War scenario. Now, let me just contextualize this in Indian context. We would assume, I mean, the general conversation is that India has a young population, India has a demographic dividend, but let me tell you that our TFR is dropping drastically in the Indian context, especially the southern states. Kerala has gone below the replacement rate, less than 2.1. Tamil Nadu is dropping below the TFR. And even states like Bihar, UP, they are also fast dropping below the third. So we have a population problem, a serious population demographic dividend problem, not just for the world, but for the entire, not just for India, but for the entire world. And how do we navigate this? Is essentially one of the ways in which you can navigate this problem is what you are proposing as a solution, a second careers framework. Now, this is a broad context under which the whole world is navigating the entire longevity and careers point of view. Now, what does it mean for a career? The old order, which means the conventional order, is that you have a title-based education, you get a certification, and then you're prepared to plunge into the labor market for the next 20, 30 years. It's not going to make sense in another 5 to 6 years. None of this is going to exist, which means essentially we don't even know what to teach our children for the jobs that are going to be created next. We don't even know what are the jobs that are going to be created 15 years down the lane. And more importantly, we do not know what to teach our kids. Now, this is a hard reality. I mean, we can always take guesses on which course to do, job roles. I mean, there are multiple literature out there, but honest answer is we are in a serious flux on the definition of what work means for each people, which means we need to build a resilient, adaptive nature within the society and a larger educational curriculum. I think this is the largest pie that we need to work on, and this is not a skills problem. This is a psychological adaptation problem that we need to incorporate. We can teach them hard skill. We can teach anybody hard skill. That's the easier part to do. But a complete adaptive mindset or the entire psychology of it is what people like me in the government we grapple with, and I'm sure these are challenges that even corporates are going to face in the coming years to come. So I think that sums up the broad framework under which we operate, Sushma. Or do we have more questions on this?
Oh, I think this is a great way to get started. And all the participants, please feel free to post your questions. We will be monitoring it. Okay. Sudha and Shanti have follow-on questions. So, Shanti, can I turn it over to you?
Sure. So, Vishnu, just following up on what you mentioned, it seems like there is a role that governments have to play in solving for this problem. And then there are corporates, and then there are individuals like us, right? What do you see as the roles of these three different stakeholders? And specifically for individuals, what do you think needs to happen? How do we prepare for this?
See, for any nation state, for any country for that matter, there's a complex interplay between the government, the society, and the markets, which are essentially corporates or the private enterprises. There are inherent frictions in terms of motivation for each of these sectors. There are inherent frictions in terms of what really drives or what actually reinforces the other. There is a democracy element. There is a for-profit motive within the enterprises. It's a very complex interplay. Let me just put forward the government aspect first, because that is what is going to shape the other two in a larger sense. What can the governments do in terms of, support longer, flexible careers? There could be a counter argument to the whole narrative that why should governments intervene in the first place? Leave it to the free market. But I think that the answer to that question is fairly well settled now in terms of the geopolitics, in terms of the vulnerabilities that the hyperglobalization and technology, everything has brought in. So I don't think I need to justify on that front, but just pure play on what can governments do. See, number one, many of our social protection and labor laws, which essentially is a safety net for employees working in the private sector. Currently, these are extended only to standard definitions. For example, the Factories Act defines an employee in a factory. Now, these are very siloed versions or understanding of how employee-employer relations are. This needs to be extended to, the non-standard or the gig economy. For example, the Tamil Nadu government has identified the role of gig workers in the economy. We have a gig welfare board, one of its first in the whole country. Similar efforts are being even the current economic survey. This year's economic survey has highlighted the role of the gig economy. So one is identifying that there exists an economy outside the regular standard worker definitions and then extending the social benefits to that. Second, which India can do well and which I feel individuals like yours can bring is look into the portable benefit system and bring in a digital public infrastructure architecture. We have a strong Aadhaar-based system, a well-functioning, probably one of the best functioning digital public infrastructure systems in the whole world. How do we plug this into a social security net? Which means shift the entire identification to not an employee, but the person as such. Assuming he moves from one employer to another employer, but you can track the person, you can extend the benefits within multiple ecosystems. Second is promote a lifelong learning and reskilling or upskilling, however you want to name it, build an entire ecosystem, which I'm sure both the central and the state governments are actively pursuing. But then it's not a role which governments alone can handle. There is enough ample scope for plug-in from private enterprises as well as private universities. Another policy level implementation could be age inclusive policies. For example, encourage return to work. This is exactly what people like you are trying to get. Even mid career reviews and mandate age inclusive hiring, which today is discriminatory in nature in some sense, but enforce anti-discrimination laws and encourage employees to move against age bias, etc. That's something which the governments can work at a larger role. Uh, Fifth, I would want to highlight this very specifically, which from an Indian perspective is that facilitate cross-sector mobility. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? I'm not sure if
Yeah.
many of you have followed this, but there is this new notification which was brought out by the University Grants Commission, the UGC, which essentially looks at the larger higher education ecosystem in the country, introducing a concept called professor of practice. So earlier, if somebody had to get into the educational system, in the higher education, you need to have a mandatory PhD and requisite qualifications. But today that has been relaxed, which means there is a continuous industry academia interface. These are regulatory framework which the governments bring in, which clearly brings in, and somebody I met recently, he was working in a corporate for the last 20 years and he's happily doing being a professor in one of the universities. So professor of practice is one such model which I feel can bring in a lot of mobility. This is just one of example. There are 1,000 other small low-hanging fruits that you can tap into. Coming to individuals, uh, there are interesting models that exist in countries like Korea where they have a well-functioning labor market information system, which means employment is a seasonal phenomenon. It's not a continuous process. There is a seasonality to the jobs being generated, jobs being refurbished, and so on and so forth. Um, a whole lot of interventions around the labor market systems can be, captured by private individuals and then tapped into. Korea is one such model. These are systems which, we can also adopt in the Indian framework. I guess a continuous interplay or a platform between citizens, the markets, and the government, and overall make us resilient as a community as a whole. That's important. There's no point working in silos, government coming out with policies, but the private enterprises not responding to that or not conducive to that, and citizens left in the lurch completely. That's a definitely not a situation that we would want. So I think it's an evolving space. But let me tell you, India has a first order problem to solve.
Yes.
A first order problem being ensuring jobs for first time entrants itself is a challenge for a country of India's proportions, right? So return to work is a second order problem in that sense from a public policy perspective, but nevertheless an important second order problem.
So just a very quick follow-on question to what you just said about digital public infrastructure and the multi-sector view of an individual and their journeys across, etc. And then I have a personal question to ask of you. So really quickly, let's understand, how does the digital public infrastructure extend beyond, and I'm thinking about honest kind of DPIs, extend beyond the NSDC run skilling kind of activities, which is largely blue collar and gray collar at the most. How does that extend to professionals and particularly enable discovery, matching, right, connects across the senior segment?
You're right. I mean, see, in India's challenge is very unique compared to any other country in the sense, for example, if I were to look at a service sector database, India still doesn't have a census of all the service sector companies, whereas we have it similar exercise for manufacturing. So service
Do
sector.
you see that happening at all or does it stay for that segment where there
No,
is
it
no
will
link
happen.
there?
It is happening because for the first time, India has mapped our informal economy. I'm sure you would have read about the unorganized sector survey because see, 85% of India's labor force is in the informal sector. So whatever employment that we're talking about is 15% is in the formal sector. Rest of us 85% is unemployed sector, unorganized sector or informal sector, as you may want to call it. So I think service sector is something which, like I said, it is not prone for direct government intervention in that sense. It's more of self-regulated platforms that can work more than an NSDC kind of model where you're looking at skilling at scale and pushing them into the workforce. The numbers that you talk about while speaking about service sector and the other sectors are very, proportionately, it's far lesser in the service sector.
Absolutely agree. So now switching gears, right? Now we are talking about the Recal group here, many of who I presume are looking to make a career pivot or extend their career beyond what is considered retirement. And I'm sure there are some that are restarting after a break or know of someone that has taken a parental care or a maternity break. And the industry is quite harsh, right? It does not look at gaps in your resumes quite favorably. This is particularly difficult at senior levels. Right? As an early career young person, you may still go to B school, take a course, come back and apply for jobs in a new domain. But when you're in your 50s and potentially have served as a CXO or a director uh, and are in a field that is declining and now need to get into a growth sector, it's not an easy transition to make. I'd like to kind of hear your own personal uh, tips and tricks, having made the very sharp pivots that you did from engineering to civil services and such. What is the fundamental attribute of the person, as well as what are some skills that you can pick up to successfully maneuver this pivot?
Okay, it's a tough one, but let me just try to put in my experience for how I did pivot. I mean, I did not start my career in the civil service. So immediately after college, I worked for a Fortune 500 company. I was a financial risk analyst, and then I quit my job for the pure motivation that I wanted to work in the social sector. In fact, I did not quit my job also to join the civil services alone. It was primarily to work in the social sector. That was the primary motivation. And I did do a rural fellowship and stuff like that. But then see, at 23, 24, you have the luxury of dabbling in multiple sectors which you are not really familiar with. So my career would have taken three pivots in that sense. One was the first decision to move from corporate to the social sector, and then social sector to the civil service. That was the progression that I underwent. And then a shorter pivot would be moving to the academia at the peak of my career for a sabbatical at Harvard. That also I would call it in a way a pivot, because staying away from the government at the peak of your time is not really a thing which people would do on a daily basis. Anyways, but having said that, at senior levels, what I feel is that two ways to look at it. One is, if there is a disruption and then you're forced to move a career, that is very different from intrinsically having that nudge to move to a new sector. I think we need to differentiate both. Now, the challenge we will encounter in the years to come is the first category. There is a disruption and you're forced to move a different career. Now, that's why I again said that you need to have a cope-up ecosystem for that. The second one is easy. If you're intrinsically motivated and you want to move to a new sector where you can take a pay cut, you can adjust to, the uncertainties of moving to a new sector. That's a completely, I don't think that's a problem that we need to solve as a society or as an enterprise, or that's there. But the first problem of, let's say the impact of AI or impact of automation, and you lose a job and then you're forced to move into a different career. I think that's the key that we need to look at, because then that is where that's where the government policy has got a larger role to play in terms of social security nets and, as an ecosystem, as a community. Because many times what's happening is we have our old age parents to take care of. Now, these are all impacting our career decisions in multiple ways. And there are various factors to it. But I think as a society, as a community, we need to have an ecosystem of tolerance and it's a very difficult thing in India to walk around without a job. It is a big deal in today's world to face a society as a whole. I think it's a societal problem rather than a government problem or a private problem, if I may put it that way.
Very true.
So there are multiple questions in the chat, Shanthi. I can just there's
With a
questions
disclaimer
from-
that I have hardly any answers for most of the questions because what we are discussing are very deep, profound, challenging questions that face the entire humanity in that context. Let me put a disclaimer there.
No, that's fine. And some of the questions are for second careers as well. So, we may be able to provide a little
Please
bit
do.
more of answers. So let me start with the first one. Sridharan, 1982 batch mechanical engineering. This was going to be one of the questions that we were going to ask in any case. What will be the impact of AI on jobs in the future, Vishnu? What's like your tea leaf here?
So I'm not the first person to talk on this. Definitely, you Google it. Everybody has an opinion on it. Let me try to put it in a very very uh, you know uh, contextual way rather than giving you very generic answers. Uh, See, let's objectively look at what is the impact of AI. Okay, there are around 8.1 billion people on Earth, the total population of Earth, out of which 84%. Okay, this was a recent Financial Times article which came out. 6.8 billion people, roughly 84% of the population, have never used an AI tool directly. They have no idea what on earth is AI. 84% of people who live in this earth. There are around 1.3 billion people, that's roughly 16% of the world's population, who have used some kind of a chat bot, a chat GPT or agentic AI tool. Just 16%. And there are around 15 to 35 million, 0.3%, who actually pay for AI services. So, in terms of impact of AI, in pure objective terms, um, you know, the impact is very, very, very minimal. I mean, people are anticipating an impact, which is anybody's guess. Now, this is the objective assessment as on date. But uh, the what is going to be the impact? I mean, that's a central question. For me, I don't see the whole use of AI into analytics and predictive algorithms, all that is going to be disruptive. It's going to reform the way in which people work. But mind you, this is not the first time technology or a technology disruption or an industrial disruption has happened. First, our feet were automated, then our hands were automated. But this time we're trying to automate our own cognitive abilities. Now, that is a very serious disruption because your impact is not just at low skilled work, but across the skill function, which has never before happened at scale. And if the adoption picks up, the current numbers are minuscule, but if we were able to solve the energy crisis and energy requirement for AI and all the problems that geopolitics, everything put together, and let's say adoption picks up, then we have a very, very a profound way of having an impact across the job roles that we see. But I think it's too early for me or for that matter, anybody to actually bring in a quantified impact of AI on the job roles that humans are about to see in the next 5 to 10 years.
Vishnu, I often make this analogy, and I'd love your thoughts on it. Excel, PowerPoint, Word, it's been around for what, 25 years, maybe more? And 1.2 billion people use it today. However, AI, right off the bat, more than 1 billion people are using it.
Yeah.
My analogy is that in the next 5 years, AI will be a tool that all of us will use. Okay. And even the unorganized sector, the farm sector, AI could be a very powerful tool for people to predict things like, is it going to rain? What kind of seed quality should I be using? So in education, of course, it's becoming in healthcare. So I believe that AI could just be a utility. And all of us, especially the 45 plus category, we may just need to know how to use AI and not to become experts. So, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? I would love to have your point of view.
Totally agree
Let's
because
debate. Yeah.
absolutely agree because see, the world will be with AI. I mean, that's a given fact. You like it or not, it is going to be a human companion. Now, how well you're going to use it, how you're going to use it, all that is fraught with multiple discussions. But I totally agree on the fact that, or agree on your analogy that you need to live with AI, and it is going to be a productivity tool for sure. But the whole argument that AI is going to displace all the jobs, I think that's a little too, or majority of jobs, because this is the same argument every time an industrial disruption, or for that matter, any technology disruption in the world has happened. But every time, if you look at history, what's happened is initially there is a display, definitely there is a overall churning out of diminishing of the existing jobs, but at the same time, a whole set of new jobs are churned. That's what history teaches us in terms of industrial disruptions. Now, that could be the same case with AI. I think it is anybody's guess on how but I think more important than whether the absolute number of jobs go down or go up, I think the interim period, how do we handle that interim period is probably of far more significance than what the end is going to be, because that's anybody's guess. And how do we make a population AI ready in terms of skills, in terms of adoption? I think that's the key. Like your point, I totally agree with you. I mean, simple point is I agree with your analogy.
Right. We have about 12 minutes. We have about 7 or 8 questions. Ishwara, your question was, what is the career path that beats the 60-year retirement? Okay, I would say on this call, at least Shanthi and I are just over 60. We started second careers when we were 60 plus. And my only suggestion to you is don't wait till 60. Start thinking about what you're going to do. There are going to be people who are very content saying, I have worked 60 years. I'm very happy taking care of my grandchildren, going to Europe and wherever my children are. But I think majority of the people want to use the knowledge productively or gainfully, or just help people. So I think if you start thinking about, number one, shift that there's no mindset as 60 is retirement. The second thing, start thinking about it when you're 40, 45. Vishnu, Shanti, Sudha, anything to add to that? Or can I move to the next question?
Sushma, I just saw a question from Logesh, who's the founder of Connect Z and is from the 2009 batch, which is somewhat tied into what you said just now. But he's obviously much younger than us. He's saying, how are you addressing someone who wants to quit to be an entrepreneur on a line different from their job? What confidence will they have to get back in case the startup fails after 2 years, especially when AI is threatening IT folks? And I want to offer a point of view here, right? And it goes back to something that Vishnu said, right, at the beginning. Technical skills, hard skills are easy to get. What one needs to focus on is the core skills one possesses, right? The human skills that you have, the relational skills that you have. And I think what has led you to be successful so far can actually help you to pivot to different choices that you make, and to help you to bounce back from one failure onto something that might lead you to success. That's my theory, but I'd love to hear everyone else's view on this.
I have a point of view, but I'll let Vishnu go first.
I think okay, first of all, Lokesh is my batchmate and good friend. So I believe he's on a startup mission now. I think, I always reiterate that technical skills can always be found or you can acquire it. In today's world, that's not really the challenge. It's about, in fact, when I joined service in the government, there was a predominant thought that you need specialists over generalists. But over the last 14 years of me being in the government and having dealt with specialists at multiple levels, all kinds of specialists, I feel world needs a lot more generalists in terms of connecting the dots. Um, in a sense that world is so much multidisciplinary, so much complex, so much vulnerabilities in terms of impacts and so on and so forth. I think this whole idea about connecting the dots. Now, these are highly cognitive abilities, which are agnostic of really hard technical skills. And I think that is the skill that really needs to be imbibed, especially when you're taking a transition 10 or 15 years down the line.
See, my point is a slightly divergent one, and focuses a lot on realizing what your core skills are, okay? Because the core skills each one of us possesses could be very, very different. I transitioned from running companies to a venture capital industry where usually people are hired when they are 22, 23, 24. And it's very difficult to sort of, number one, enter that industry. And number two, you have to compete with a whole lot of young people. How do I do that? I am leveraging on my past experience and saying, how can I make decisions better, faster, okay, better than what somebody else can do? And the second biggest advantage that a lot of people in the senior level have is you don't need full-time jobs. You can afford to say, I don't need my $500,000 paycheck. And that in the future is going to be a huge leveler. But this requires determination, and it requires some amount of forethought and learning and reskilling. Learning and reskilling is going to be lifelong. You can't afford to say at the pace at which the world is moving, and that is one of the cornerstones of second careers. We have built a community because we want people to learn from each other. And this is a core principle that we have. The second biggest thing that we have is there's constant learning, relearning, de-learning. And we are building our own assessment tools to do that. So I think these are a couple of tenets that we all need to follow. All right, we're down to the wire. We have 6 more minutes. Shanthi, Sudha, any other interesting questions?
There's one from Raju, 95 batch chemical, on the relevance of full-time residential programs like master's, PhD programs, and threat to faculty positions in universities. I presume you're saying that for the professor of practice comment earlier in terms of enabling that through the new education policy.
Yes.
In the AI-driven era.
Right.
Any thoughts on that, Vishnu?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I know EdTech platforms have taken the world by storm ever since Coursera, Udemy, and even government has its own EdTech platforms. And you can the whole argument that you can transfer skills without actually being in a university setting. But again, that misses the whole point that I really don't remember a word of what I actually learned at NIT Trichy. But I still carry with me the whole set of non-technical skills that I would not have got otherwise for going to the campus. So I think the whole idea that the world is completely transactional in terms of skills, we need to come out from that. Universities will continue to be, centers for innovation, for collaboration, and that is going to drive a country's progress. There's no doubt on that. I don't think we are yet ready to say that everything can be outside the university framework. Even today, I mean, I've just returned from a Harvard MIT ecosystem, a whole set of ideas every day over coffee that gets discussed, deliberated. I mean, those are ideas that drive the world than which have been transacted over screens. So I don't think we are yet ready for that. As far as faculty threat has come, I mean, that's I mean, there is always a space in the academy. It's always been there. Professor of practice, etc. Just it's just a multi-sectoral collaboration. It doesn't. A professor of practice is definitely not a replacement for a full-time professor. Definitely no. It's an add-on, or it's more of a collaborative. It's also look at it not in terms of replacement, but rather an opportunity for industry and academia to collaborate. I think that's how we need to look at it. It's not an either or. It's a collaborative effort. So it's definitely not going to be a threat.
And if I have to bridge two comments, one of Lokesh's, kudos Lokesh, that you have actually, turned to entrepreneurship as your second career. And the question to the comment that K.C. Kumar has posted. I think entrepreneurship in and of itself does offer tremendous opportunities and at second careers. We are not doing it today, but we will do it by the end of the year. We are actually planning to help people become entrepreneurs. And Casey, my question to you would be, why do you want to be just a mentor to somebody? Why not push yourself to see whether you can actually start something? Okay. So I think entrepreneurship is one of the biggest levelers that anyone can have. Yes, there's rampant discrimination even there. Older founders find it difficult to get funded and stuff like that. But if you have a good idea, right? I think the concept of job has to shift from just traditional to figuring out how you can put what you have learned to good use. With that, sorry, did anybody say something?
Can I just intervene for a moment?
Sure, Casey, but briefly, because we are wrapping up. Yeah.
Sure, I know that you are close to the thing. Now, I only said that it's not that I want to be guiding people. I could be an entrepreneur as well. As you said, the problem at this age would be of, especially Indian context, funding and other things would be a big task.
We will talk offline. Okay. We will talk offline sure. Because I have ideas, because I need to know you better. Okay.
Oh, yeah, sure. I can share my profile also. Thank you.
Right. Vishnu, Shanthi, Sudha, any closing comments?
Well, I just have a final, thought. I mean, beyond jobs and careers, we have a very central question of what gives meaning if work stop being the central pillar of identity. This is a very deep question, and work has colonized human identity so thoroughly in modern societies that we often can't articulate what we'd be without it. I've experienced this myself for the last 1 year, where I was in a completely different setting and work really didn't define me at all over the last 1 year. Well, the honest answer for this is, there has to be a larger reason, or rather a purpose in general, and which is not defined by employment. There are historical and anthropological models for this. Many pre-industrial societies, which is your pre-modern world, organized around kinship, around rituals, around crafts, other than profession. Now, the risk is not that there's nothing meaningful left. It's basically how, as humanity, we're going to navigate this transition period when the old guard, as we know, as job, employment, etc., and the new, which is not yet built. And between this period of what is happening now and what's going to happen in the future, if social fragmentation happens for whatever reasons, however we know it, bring in complexities of geopolitics, etc., then I think that is a question that all of us need to address as a society, as a community, as a nation, as a world. And I hope the larger discussions need to be around the fundamental foundations of what the purpose of society or humanity as such. As I leave at those founding thoughts, it's a little philosophical, I know, but I think that is a deeper question that we're trying to address.
Thank you,
Very
Vishnu.
well said, Vishnu. Extremely articulate. And I think somewhere in there is the reminder that you have to let go of what you have
Absolutely.
put as a box around yourself in framing your identity. And unless you let go of that, the vast, infinite possibilities, as we like to call them, that lie beyond that box will not be accessible to you. So at Second Careers, we would love to help people explore more of themselves. Our founding motivation is to help professionals to live very fulfilling, purposeful lives. And, just like to, in closing, invite everyone to check out the platform and help us build it. We would all be still early adopters in the larger scheme of things. We're just a little over a year old as a platform. Help us build it and take it in the direction that will help others like you. And of course, help you become the best version of yourself.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, Lokesh, for your wonderful question there. And Vishnu, extremely articulate, great insights. I wish this were a much longer session. And NIT Trichy, thank you so much. I think you're running a very enlightened alumni group, and we hope to see a lot of you in our platform. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sushma, and good luck to all your initiatives. Good luck.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Sudha.